Hi, I'm Cori. Welcome to Creating with Scraps. Cara Brandon from Cara Brandon Creations was kind enough to agree to do a 5-item swap with me. I had seen the one that Gayle Agostinelli and Ceri the Crafter did, and I immediately reached out to Cara and Tracy Fox and asked, hey, would you guys be interested? And they both graciously said yes. So I've got one in the UK and one in the US, and it was a whole lot of fun. I highly encourage anybody who's interested in doing that with a pal to do it. And we're calling it a 5-item swap or share with a pal. And I was going to learn editing skills, and I attempted that, but I was an epic fail. I did the unboxing and I tried to combine it with the making video, and I accidentally deleted the unboxing, which is really a bummer because what Cara sent me is just fabulous, and I'd already put some of it away. So I'm essentially going to show you the bits I pulled for this part, and just a huge apology to Cara for my ineptitude. So one of the packages that she sent me, oh, and I immediately made a cluster because that's what I do with items. The bags that she had put them in, she had put these really great, and I even saved them, these really great little copper numbers on. In fact, well, the copper there, but I'll use those for something else. She'd put the great copper numbers on, and then she'd sealed them with this sealing wax, and I thought they were so pretty. So when I opened the bag, I took the sealing wax off, and I have enough to make some clusters with it. Anyway, so inside the bags that she had sent me were some fabric charms. Now there was a bunch of different type of fabric. I had pulled two of them, 2 pieces aside to use, but there was all kinds to choose from, and it was really cool. And I think that's what they're called. I believe they're called charms. And this is a recipe, and the one I ended up using for the project was a ledger one. Seriously cool stuff. So fabric charms and these incredibly cool vintage tickets. There were a variety of them to choose from, which I thought were amazing. And then tucked into the ledger were these. I of course kept them because they will be fun to use. Let's see, plastic discs. There were several of these little, I don't know if they're for coins or for specimens. They're roughly 1/4 inch thick and about 1.5 inches wide. And you can open them up and put little treasures in them. So I got some of those plastic discs and some coin windows. And this has a peel back. I'm imagining doing all kinds of fun things to the surface, either covering it with paper or collaging or decoupaging or splattering or some mixed media techniques, all kinds of things. But for this project, I kept it simple because my goal is to get it done in a relatively quick manner since I have no editing skills. So coin envelopes, or coin windows, I guess, and then cool old ledger. Now, I have some old ledger, but I'm just always hesitant to use it. And I said, no, Cori, use the ledger because look how awesome that is. And I think this one's from 08. The one I used for my project was from 06. And my grandmother was born in 06. So I really wanted to use it, but I absolutely love it. Yeah, see, this is 1908. And so she gifted me some of this stellar ledger. All right, so me being me, I started out thinking this big grandiose project, and if I had continued that way, it would have taken 4 or 5 days and multiple videos to do. So I went with plan B and I toned it down. And those are the 5 items that I used, but I'll show you how I incorporated them. I've still got the black file folders on my desk, and I've got a couple more projects with it because I love the black file folders and I had just put them away and wasn't using them. So here, I kind of let the items dictate it. Now, I will admit that I'll probably cover this with kind of like a collage medium or distress collage medium because the paper is so old, it tears easily, which is why I reinforced it with file folder. So what I did is I used the ledger to cover the file folder to make this little notebook. And then I used the disc here and I put some dried baby's breath in it that I'd had in my stash. And I used that as my closure. And then I added a magnet. So that's one of the items that I added. So maybe I should go over that. So I used the fabric charms, the vintage tickets, the plastic discs. Okay, talking is clearly a challenge. Sorry about that. Coin windows and ledger. And then I added 2 file folders, Tracy labels, a tag, some black string, eyelets, magnets, and chipboard. And I made this little fun little folio. And I'll make some changes, but I want to show you basically what it is. So it's got a magnetic closure. It's got, using the file folders, half-inch spine, yes. And then I made a closure using that same file folder. And then it opens up. Now, I have made these, everybody's made these. They're just a lot of fun, these little accordion holders for ephemera and such. I did it probably, maybe even 2 years ago when I first started making YouTube videos, and then I stopped for a bit and then I came back. But I believe Tracy has recently done them, and everybody, Gayle, and you name it, people have done it because they're fun. And I added a bit of, I guess it's ribbon, cotton ribbon, I guess, with yardstick measuring, tape measure. That's the word I'm looking for. Oh man, I told you, words are tough tonight. Tape measure on there so that you can, unclip it with a bulb pin and use it. And then just a really simple disc closure. And I covered the file folder insert that I put in here with just a bit of the ledger because it was too cool not to use. Speaking of which, I need to turn my laminator on. Okay, and then you open it up, and inside, the bags that she sent me my treasures in, I saved, and I glued them together to make this accordion style folder. And then inside here, I put some just bits and pieces that you would use if you were using this type of a book. There are some field notes and labels, a little bit of the alcohol ink dyed cellophane tape to hold things in place, some coin envelopes and bags and what have you to store your treasures, your found treasures. And then I put these tickets in that I got, and these tickets are I'll show you in when I get to it. The cool thing about these is these train tickets. So you can use a little circle stamp, or I used a light ink, distress ink stamp with a circle. And then you can indicate the month and the day that you found it. So if you're collecting flower treasures or leaf treasures or something like that, you can put the little stamp right on here, or you could circle it, I suppose, and put this right in on your page, which is why I included them, because they've got that little date option, which I thought was really fun. Yeah, they work great for snippets or clusters, but they also work really well for including with your found treasures. And then I put in this back pocket, I put some more of those, I can't get them out because my fingers are fat, but these things, coin windows, okay? So they are in the back there. One of the things I did that I won't do again is I made plenty of room for the accordion, but the back one I glued it all the way down, and I shouldn't have done that because it makes it really hard to get out. So note to self, live and learn, don't do that. So it's got this little accordion folder as part of the front pocket. And then I just did a simple close. It doesn't need it to be any stronger than that. And then when I inserted the little accordion fold, I deliberately kept some space right here so that I could tuck a pen in, because if you're out collecting things, you need to mark when and where you found it and what it is and that sort of thing. So I wanted to be able to include a pen. And then I used some of the ledger as the page inserts, right? So if I'm finding a treasure like a rare leaf or flower or something, I can use the items in my little folio, put it right on my page, and I've got pages to write on. When I was doing this, there was a bit of pencil on the ledger, and I just couldn't make myself erase it or not use it. It was just too cool. And then on the back page, I used the fabric, and I used the coin envelope, and here is some dried baby's breath. So I've got the dried baby's breath on the front closure and the little plastic disc, and then I put it also in the little specimen window, simply because that's what I had. And then I made a fabric pocket with fabric charms, and I used a hefty piece of chipboard for your writing back, so that when you take your little notebook out in the field, you can put the writing board behind it so that you have a solid surface to write on and write your notes. And then I had a pair of these little folding scissors, little folding sewing scissors, I suppose, but I just clipped them on with a bulb pin, because when you're collecting a leaf or something, you need a way to cut it. And pocket knife was too big for this. So a little pair of scissors, bulb clipped on onto that pocket, and then I turned the coin envelope into a window pocket, and then just a tag with the date that I actually made this on it. So kind of a simple, quick project, and you can certainly, zhuzh it up and add more details and such to it. But it was, sometimes I find I try to go too far over the top and I make it more complicated than it needs to be. So this one I tried to be really mindful about not doing that. And here you go. This is what I had. Its measurements are about 5 inches tall by about 6 inches wide. And I chose those measurements for a couple reasons. One, the fabric charm that fit that size. Two, the ledger page. There was some plain ledger as well as the printed ledger. And the plain ledger page fit this size pretty well. And three, the envelopes, that the items that she came in, the envelopes that she had sent that I repurposed fit in this size. So it was intentional on the size that I used for that. And then these are just some Tim Holtz bulb pins and paper clip to hold them in place. All right. And my goal here is to show you, I won't be able to show every step, but you really won't need to see every step. I mean, it's some of it's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll show you the tricky bits. All right, let's see, where did I start? I started with the bases. I used 2 file folders. These are just standard old file folders. I had purchased some black ones a while ago. And I did some of the prep work in advance simply because it would take too long otherwise. But you know what I didn't do is I didn't bring over the sewing machine, darn it. So I'm going to have to turn around and ask you to talk amongst yourselves. Sorry about that. All right. So I took the 2 2 file folders and I cut them in half. Well, not quite half actually. I cut the first one, which was the cover, at 5 1/4 inches wide. So I've got it folded, and horizontally I cut 5 1/4 inches tall. And the final measurement's about 12 1/2 inches or so, but that's something that you can cut later. Big thing here is 5 1/4 inches wide. And then I cut, once it was cut, then I trimmed it down to 6 inches. So I used my score line, where these score lines are folded, right? And this is going to be my pleat in the back, right? So this is your pleat or your fold or your measurement, right? Just how the file folder folds. So from the left side of the fold to the edge is 6 inches. And that's true on both the front and the back. And what I did, I'll show you here. I, like I said, prepped a little bit in advance. So I've got my 1/2 inch spine that the file folder comes with, and I just covered the front and the back with the ledger. And I used this glue stick, the Gorilla glue stick, because that's the only one I ever use. And then I put it through my laminator to heat it. And this isn't lifting or buckling or wavy at all. So I cut it, the file folder, covered it with the ledger, and this is my front piece, and I'm putting it aside. Then I cut a second piece. So cut the first piece at 5 1/4, cut the second piece at 5. I trimmed down this after I put the ledger on because I wanted to make sure it came all the way to the top, and if I cut both of them exactly, then I wouldn't have any wiggle room. So I glued the ledger down, then I trimmed it to 5 inches. So this ends up, the final measurement for this is 5 inches. If you're better at gluing things and making sure they're straight than I am, you can start with 5 inches. But I wanted to make sure that it went all the way from edge to edge. So I cut my second piece. So I cut the first piece at 5 1/4 so that I would have some room. Second piece, I cut it exactly at 5. And that is my inside piece or my insert. So I cut this at 5, but before I made any more cuts, I scored. So I used the actual fold lines in the file folder and scored. And then the top from where it's folded to the edge is 6 inches. And then what I did, and I'll show you, Shoot, I think it'll make more sense if I show you. I wasn't going to, but then I don't want to be confusing, so I will show you real quick. It doesn't take long. All right, so I cut it. This piece is 5 inches, and it doesn't. This piece doesn't matter because it's going to get trimmed off. So I didn't even care. So it's 5 inches. This front piece from the fold to the edge is 6 inches. And all I did to do that was I lined up. I opened it up and I lined where I folded it up on my mark on my my dally trimmer, and cut that at 6 inches. So that's going to be my front. Now the back piece, right? Because I want this flap to be long to hold it closed. So my back piece, I'm going to score it at 6 inches. So I'm leaving it folded just like this. I'm going to score it at 6 inches. And then again at 6.5. And that way it'll have the same dimensions as the top piece. Okay. I scored it at 6 and 6.5. Then what I'll do is I'll take, I want to get at the center. I want to cut away everything that's not this flap. So I've got a 1/2 inch gusset or fold on the front and a 1/2 inch gusset or fold on the back. So basically at this point, it looks like this. Okay, 1/2 inch, looks like a sleeve. This back one, what I did was I used my 1.5 inch ruler, but you can use any ruler, and measured out 1.5 inches because of the size of my disc, my coin disc. I want to make sure that my flap is wide enough to fit that disc, and it's about 1.25 inches, I believe is what it was. So I made my flap 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go in the center of these two pieces, and don't need that there. I am going to mark all the way back to the back fold. Remember, for your flap, you have 2 folds so that it can fold over the side where you've created the bulk. So you want to draw your line or cut all the way back to this initial score mark, or fold mark, I guess. So I'm going to do that. And I'll make sure it's centered, or mostly centered. All right, and then I'm going to make marks with my pencil, and then I'm just going to cut those off. Let's see. Yeah, you can see that. You can use your trimmer. You can use an X-Acto knife or a cutting knife, whatever. I'm just going to use my scissors because this doesn't have to be perfect. All right. Cut there. And here. And then when I cut the pieces that I don't want off, where I've got that score line, I'm going to cut just to the inside edge of the score line. I don't want it to roll. And let's flip that the other way so I don't do something silly like cut my microphone cord. Just to the inside edge of that. Okay. All right, save those. And that is how I made the flap on the insert. Just like that. Now remember, I've got 2 pieces. I've got my cover and I've got my insert. And here, you know what, maybe I won't even sew pieces in because you don't really need to see that. All right, before I sew in my back pocket and before I sew the coin holder, not the plastic one, but the window, the coin window, I guess, on here, I am going to do this piece. I'm going to do my accordion folder piece. All right, this is going to be the insert, and I am going to tuck this completed piece when it's all said and done. My last step will be to glue these 2 pieces together. So I'm not going to have a seam that shows on my spine, and it gives me a little bit extra durability and thickness. It's somewhat similar if you watched the Yellow Wildflower album. It's somewhat similar to that. Same basic concept. Tuck one into the other. All right, so I'm going to put these 2 to the side while I construct my accordion fold. And my accordion fold, I did cut it. Okay, good. So what I did with the accordion fold is I took, oh, here you go, here it is. So I took my second file folder. Remember I told you I used 2, and I just cut a top piece off of one. So I still have a fold. I have a lot of file folder I can use, but I cut this piece right here off of the front or the back, doesn't matter, of the file folder. And I cut it to, my dimensions are, it is 5 1/4 inches wide, and the total is 9 1/2 inches long for this particular project. And the reason I say that is because I've got my pieces ready to go. Now these, so you can see, they are the used, torn, beat up envelopes. These are the envelopes that Cara put her treasures in for me. And I am going to repurpose these into the accordion fold. All right. First thing you do is you cut, well, I guess it doesn't really matter the order, but one of the things you do is you cut your piece, and you're going to cut it to 5 1/4 inches wide and about 9 1/2 inches long for this size. And again, it was structured for these envelopes. So what I did with these envelopes is I opened them up and took the treasures out, and now I'm going to fold them in half. So this was the bottom flap. My original intent was going to sew this in the book, and then I was taking way too long, so I went with plan B. So here's the envelope. I'm just folding it in half. And same thing with the second envelope. I had opened it up already, so I'm folding it in half. My closed edges are going to be on the outsides. So my sealed closed edges are on the right and the left. The open edges are on the top and the bottom. All right, so I've got those. And now I'm going to cut them both to the same height. And I believe I chose 3 inches because of the size of this. Let's see if I'm even close. Yep, 3 inches is what I chose. Okay. And then I'm going to cut off the top and the bottom, the opened pieces. Yeah, I can still use this even though it's torn, and I'll show you how and why. So cut off that so it's 3 inches, and cutting off this at 3 inches. All right. And I'll save these because that's really cool paper, and I can make some clusters out of those. All right. Those are cut. Now, I'm going to line these up, and I want to line them up pretty closely. And I like to take a divot out. You don't have to. I take the divot out. Where's my sample? Simply because of smashing my cuticles when I get out whatever is inside the pocket. So I like to take a small divot out. It just makes it easier to get into, but you don't have to. If you don't want to take a divot, don't take a divot. I'm going to use, what size? I grabbed the 2 1/2 inch. Now it will not cut, well, mine won't, maybe you guys can, but mine will not cut through all 4 layers at once. But what I do is I line all 4 layers up and get it mostly centered. Now I usually mark the center, but on this it really doesn't matter. And then I squeeze, and it's not going to cut everything, and I know that, but I now have cut marks for where I want it to cut. So you can see here, I've got a little bit of a start, and then I will use that as my guideline because it'll easily cut the 2 layers. It just won't cut all 4 layers. And then I can, and I've got those cut lines on the second one, so I can cut both pieces, and they should match up pretty closely. They don't have to be 100% perfect, but it should match up pretty closely. Okay. Now, see, there you go. Now I'm going to glue my envelopes together. And what I do, because you really, as you saw with mine, you really need to not glue them to the edges. If you glue them to the edges, you don't have the ability to accordion it like this, like I did in the back. So what I'm going to do is use my 1-inch ruler, and none of this is going to show, so it doesn't really matter. And I am going to, I guess I could use my other ruler too. I'm going to go to 3/4 of an inch because that's what I did on the other one. I'm going to go 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to mark all of the sides at 3/4 of an inch because that's going to be my glue line. I don't want to go past that with my glue. And that's just a reminder to me not to overlook it. And then same thing, I'll open it back up. Now you can, at this point, after you don't have to, you can use your grid on your desk if you want, or you can eyeball it. It doesn't have to be an exact thing at all. I just prefer it this way. What am I doing here? Okay, 3/4 of an inch. And 3/4 of an inch. And then the outsides, it's way easier for me to do it this way. All right, so I mark all of my sides, and now I will glue them. If you are a precision gluer, you can use glue tape, double-sided adhesive tape, like score tape or that type of thing. I don't always line things up perfectly the first time, and guaranteed, if I put the score tape on, it will not line up. So I use glue, wet glue. This is thick enough that the wet glue isn't going to show. I'm not going to saturate this thing. You can also use your glue stick. Now, if you use kid glue stick, it may not work as well, but I don't know, it just depends on your glue stick. And I'll glue it here. I'll glue both sides. And I'm staying inside those glue lines. And what I'll do with my wet glue or white glue is I'll go right up to the top, because I want that to be really well adhered. And then I fold it over and push down. And I'm not in frame, sorry about that. Fold it over and push it down. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other one. I'm going to put glue or glue stick. Now I have to be careful on this one. I tore it a little bit, and it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but I want to make sure that I don't glue this piece to the inside. I want that to and the same thing when I'm gluing over here, I don't want to put glue where it's torn. So I'm going to have to be really careful where I put this. Make sure I can see it. And I'll make that go like that. And that way it won't glue closed. And then I'm going to do the same thing, push them down, glue it together. I mean, it's ideal not to tear your bag, but if you do, you do. Now, if you wanted to ink, now would be a great time to ink. And we know I normally ink, but for the sake of this, I'm not going to. All right, so I've got 1, 2, and now I'm going to put these two together. Could I have glued these two pieces first and then two? Yeah, it really, really doesn't matter. As the goal is to get all 4 pieces, or all 4 sides, I guess, together. And that's what I'm going to do. In fact, I think what I'll do, I'm going to check myself, because I don't know that I got these perfectly centered. See, I didn't. So I am so glad I did that, so that they match up. All right, so it goes this way to this way. As I didn't measure and perfectly center my divot, so one side, if I didn't make it perfectly centered, one side would be wider than the other, which is why I just checked. All right. I'm going to match these up and push down on that. And glue. All right, so there is my insert for my accordion. Envelopes are just awesome. Whatever size envelope you want to use. First time I made it, I did paper and fold, 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 and envelopes are way easier. I think that was Tracy. That was brilliant. All right, then I'm going to score my insert. And the first score for this size is at 3 1/4. And this is going to be the front. So I'm going to score this at 3 1/4 inches. And then I'm going to score it again at 3 1/2. So I'm going to have a 1/4 inch gusset at the bottom. And I'm going to press on both of the places that I just scored. All right. Now I've got it scored, right? Both my 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch gussets there. I lay that flat on my work surface, and I'm going to start scoring at 3 1/4 inches, and I'm going to score to 4 1/4 inches. And I do that, and I did it the first couple times I made these in my original video, because it gives you rollability. So expandability, rollability with your cover. And it's just convenient to have. So I'm going to score it. And yes, I'm going to cover this with ledger, but I scored it now just to make sure that I know exactly where I need my ledger to go. All right, so I've got my base, and ultimately I'm going to put this in here. It's going to sit in the bottom, and that's going to be my insert. But because I really love that old ledger, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use some scraps of that ledger to cover, but I'm only going to cover the part that's going to show. So when I insert this into my book, right, this is the insert piece. When I insert it here, this section, this top section will show, and this top section will show. But the back, I don't need to cover that because it's going to be glued down to my insert. So I am going to get, here I have a scrap piece of ledger. And I hope I have enough cut. I think I do. So I'm going to take this ledger and I am going to just lay it down like this and then run it through my laminator to make sure there are no air bubbles and there are no pockets of lift. All right. This one's the wider piece, so I'm going to do that first. And I'm kind of liberal with my glue stick. And I am not a glue stick person. I've long said glue sticks are for kindergarten. And I'm going to go, because this is going to stick in the bottom of my book, I'm going to go slightly past it. Not a lot, but just because it's going to be on the back of the thing. So I don't need to waste this old cool ledger. But I do want to make sure that it's completely covered and it doesn't lift. And then I am going to, let's see, is that going to be wide enough? Am I going to be sorry? Let's see. Nope, it's not going to be wide enough. All right. Okay, here we go. I will grab, this will be wide enough. Okay. Okay. I'm going to, I think I'll trim this down just a tiny bit. Just a smidge because that edge is so fragile. So I'm just going to take that very edge off before I start. And then I'm going to line the bottom of my ledger piece, and let's see, make sure that glue stick isn't dry. The heat from the laminating machine reactivates the glue, but I still want to make sure I get it down there really good. And then I will line these pieces up. And I'll loosely trim them off. I'll trim them off with the trimmer to make sure they're perfectly straight later. But I'll give it a cut, a wide cut there. And then the same thing here. I want to make sure that I have enough on here to cover the bottom. Not the whole bottom, but the underside where the fold goes, right? Like that. And now I am going to line it up on the top. And did I do it upside down? I did. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay. This is why I love glue stick. I did that upside down. Oh, man. I still think I can make it work. Please, baby. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right. Making sure that this is going in the direction that I want it to do and not upside down. Remember, when I fold this, this is going to be the front pocket flap, and this is going to be the top. So I should have checked that first. Whew, glad I caught it, and glad it worked out. All right, but you can see, even when I plan this stuff, I make mistakes all the time. All right, there we go. No harm, no foul. That is on and on. Now, I'm going to remember, I'm going to fold this up, glue it into the back of my insert like this. I want to make sure that my ledger, this piece of ledger, is that the right one? Oh, I think so. Ah, this is it. Because I want these lines to line up. I think it'll look nicer if they're lining up. So I am going to glue this top piece. And you'll see when I'm done here, I even wrote myself a note to make sure I told you this. Well, you'll see when I'm done that they should, in a perfect world, line up, and they'll both go in the right direction. You know what, let's just go like this because sometimes I'm me. And let's just go like this to make sure that they line up the way they're supposed to. Yeah, they do. Okay, good. Okay. And that is the beauty of glue stick and working this way. Okay, so you can see I'm going to have to trim a little bit off there, but I make a little bit of overlap, so that'll work out just fine. Now, you can see they're still not tight or secure. I'm going to run this through my laminator. I've just got it off to the side here. And that heat from my heat laminator will help set it. Okay, what are we doing? 35. Okay, well, I was hoping to keep it at 30 minutes, but that didn't happen. But it shouldn't be too terribly much longer. I'm not going to sew in everything. I'm just going to show you how I did it because the videos take too long to upload otherwise. All right, it's coming through my laminator, and I will trim it when it's done. Okay, sorry, silence for a moment. Just thinking, oh, I don't want to do something foolish. And it is done. Now you can see I didn't line this up perfectly, and this is going to be trimmed, of course. So I'm going to trim that now. I'm just taking a smidge off of it. And the same is true of this one. Okay. And then this side is lined up pretty well. I don't need to worry about that. But this side is not. So I'm going to fold it at the score line where I'm scoring the bottom, and then I will trim off that little bit of extra. Okay. Now this, if you were going to corner round, this is a good time to corner round. So you see, oh, and see I didn't trim it right. Well, heck, pull out the trimmer and do it again. What happens when I rush. I am not the speedy scrapper or crafter or paper worker. I'm just not. And it'll still fit because I left myself, once the envelopes are folded, I left myself about 1/4 of an inch for this very reason, in case I needed to trim something or do something. So these completed envelopes are right around 5. This was right around 5 1/4, so it'll still fit. All right. Here is the outline of my pouch. And now I can, because this is such old paper, I don't have to score this again, but if I wanted to, I could score it again so that it has that rollability. But you really don't need to because this paper is thin and old. If you were using thicker paper, then you might want to score it again, but I'm not going to. I will give the corners around though, because it's a little gentler on them. The top edge corners, I will round those. And of course, I will ink it before I do anything else with it, but for the sake of speed, not inking right now. All right, here are my 2 gussets at the bottom. And you can see I've got a little bit on the back just so that it doesn't show and it seals that edge, but I didn't have to cover the entire back. And in fact, if I wanted to, I could save that bit of ledger for a cluster. And then the same thing on the front. All right, so this is what I am going to put inside the insert. Last step before I do that. Now, I pulled my string from the bottom up. If you were wanting to use, let's see, I'll pull it over here. If you were wanting to use the envelope closure, a double envelope closure, you certainly can. I just put the string on the back of my ephemera holder prior to gluing it in. And so I didn't need to put a second one. I just had the one. But if you want to do 2 of the envelope closures, make sure you put it on before you glue the 2 pieces together, before you glue your insert into your ephemera holder. So if you're wanting that, do that now. I do not want that, so I am just going to do this. And then I'm still using these guidelines to put this into my insert that's going to go on the inside of my other insert. So an insert into the insert. And again, be wiser than I and don't glue all the way to the edge. It's not going to be as easily accessible. All right. And then I put it in one at a time. I try to put the bottom where they match into the groove that I made, that 1/4 inch groove, because I tend to fill everything way too full. And I've got equidistant on both sides, and I'm just going to pull that up and give it a second or two to dry. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And I'll glue just the top edge with the wet glue. And I'll fold this back up to the back. Now again, you can use dry line glue if that's what you like to do. I'm not a fan. Okay, see, here you go. I put it on the second line and not the first line. Oh, Corey. Well, once again, glue to the rescue. And I didn't do these things when I was off camera, heaven forbid. See, you've got 2 lines there. Make sure you put the envelope on the correct spot so that it does what you want it to do. And it's mostly centered. Yeah, good enough. And then, do I need to re-glue that? Maybe. See, it's a whole lot more forgiving. If I'd used dry line tape, I would have had to start from scratch, and I don't have any more of these envelopes. All right, so then I'm going to fold my gusset and just lightly match it up. Now I could put it through my laminator if I wanted to, but it's pretty chunky at this point and it will flatten this, and I'd rather it didn't do that. So I just have to give it time to dry before I do anything else. And my next step is, I'll pull this over here. I put the little bits and pieces in here so that I could show you. I had already put, I'd punched, these are 3/4 inch circles. That's the size I use most often for this. I had punched the 3/4 inch circles. I did 3 of them of the file folder scrap. And then what I do is I'm going to put an eyelet in here. You can use a brad. So I put a dot in the center to hold it in place because it's not going to impede the string because it's only the very center, and I'm going to punch a hole in it anyway. And then this is 5¼ inches, so roughly 2½ if I go that way. And then I'm just going to push that on the top. And I will mark the center because there's no way I'll punch it. And it doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but I want to get it sort of close. And I'll use my punch, my crocodile punch tool. And can't see where I wrote the pencil. Nice, Core. There it is. Okay. And then I'm going to pop an eyelet in there. Got a little dish of trinkety things. Or as Tim Holtz would say, trinkety bits. Okay, so push that in, set that eyelet, and that is ready to go. Then, before I glue this into my, I would honestly ink it because, boy, it's so much easier to do this before you glue it in. It just is. So, and I'm not even going to give it a lot because this is really vintage ledger. And you can see how it tears really easily. Like I said, I'd probably seal it with some kind of a sealant, collage medium or something. And there we go. All right, I have this big long string. I don't need all of that, but what I'll do is I'll flip this over. So I'm on the back side, right? And again, roughly in the center, I'll put some glue down. And I know that's where I want to put my string. And then I take packing tape. Yeah, I'm a fan of the Gorilla products. They seem to work pretty well. I will put some string and put it down on the back. And then I just take a piece of the packing tape. And I tried not to take too much. I took too much this time because I don't want, it doesn't glue as well when you put glue on top of packing tape. So I want to make sure I press down. I get the packing tape there nice and tight over that string. And then I can bring my string around front. And I don't even need to wrap it around because it's sturdy. I grabbed the microphone cord to try to wrap it around and I'm like, why isn't this working? Yeah. And just like that. And so I don't need to use all of that string. I can use it for other pieces. So I'll just loop it once and twice and tie a knot in it. And then I know exactly how much of the string I need, and I can use the remainder for other pieces. Okay, so that is my, and I can of course wrap it around again if I choose to, but I don't have to. Okay, like so. You can put a bead on there. You can do any of those pieces if you like. All right, now I'm going to grab my insert. Remember, this is the piece with the flap. And I had two of those because I did them as a sample. I want the flap or the closure on the right-hand side. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to glue it on the left. Now, if you don't want to put a pen in here, you can center it with your, you've got those crease lines where the fold is, you can center it. But I wanted to include a pen and I wanted to have room for the pen. So I kind of justified it to the left a little bit, like so. And that way I knew I could put a pen in there and it would clear easily. There you go, you can see. So when I'm gluing it in, I was mindful of that. In fact, I could even leave that in there as I glue it. And I'm going to put some wet glue on the back of this. Maybe. And I'm going to glue this down. Now I would clamp it or something just to, make sure it's really good and dry, but we're not going to take the time for that. All right, and gluing it in. And I tried to keep about, and you can't see it real clearly on this simply because it's black on black, but I try to keep about the same distance on the bottom. I don't want it to touch all the way on the bottom and on the left side. And that, well, it's not dry. And like I said, I would clamp that and let it dry for a bit, just a few minutes or so. And that is your left insert. Now on the right side, what I did was, and I pre-sewed it. Oh, here it is. So I just sewed a simple hem on the top of that fabric, or I folded it over, pressed it with my hair crimper, and sewed it down. And that's going to be my back pocket, right? None of these stitches are going to show because this is tucking inside the cover. And then I've got this little coin holder envelope. It's got wax paper to keep it from sticking, and there's adhesive on it because these are really cool. And then I've got some dried baby's breath. I probably have more dried baby's breath than I need, but I'm going to put that little bit of dried baby's breath in that window. And fold it closed. See, so whatever flower or coin or image or whatever you want to put in there. And then I'll cut this stem. Now, because I didn't bring my sewing machine over here, what I did at this point, before you do this, of course, you can ink it or cover it or do anything you want. What I did is before I sewed my pocket in, I sewed the coin envelope to the pocket. I used a zigzag stitch and I sewed on 3 sides, which allowed me to put a tag in the back, make it as a pocket. And these tags were gifted to me, and they're kind of like interesting shape at the top. There we go. So that by sewing on the 3 sides, it allowed me to tuck this in. Okay, I used a zigzag stitch. Then once this piece was in place, this piece was sewn into place, then I used my purple tape, my beloved purple tape. It held this down, and I went and I sewed. When I sew these pockets, because cotton and it's got wiggle room, I sew a right side and a left side, or left side and a right side. It doesn't really matter which. I may have said that backwards, but you know what I mean. So this is already sewn on. I sew each of the sides, and then I sew the bottom. That's just personal preference, because otherwise what I find happens is it ends up doing this. It gets a little wonky. So that's why I do it that way. Sometimes I'll use even a little bit more purple tape. I'll put purple tape on the bottom and the top, make sure it's perfectly straight, and then I'll sew one side and the other side, and then I'll lift the tape and I'll sew the bottom. All right, so we're going to assume that this has all been sewn in. For the sake of speed, I'm going to keep moving forward. Now, right here, this is where, remember, this is going to be inside my cover. This is where I do this piece, this little disc. Okay, I took the little disc and I took some more of that dried baby's breath and I put it inside there and I closed it up. All right, just like that. I put this on top and I used Tim Holtz Collage Medium. I took a scrap. I did that last actually. I took a scrap that was the same width. Well, this one's not 1.5, so let me cut that to 1.5. Thought I had the strip ready to go. All right, I took a second scrap of the cardstock or the file folder and I laid it down just like this, but I didn't glue it yet. I took, here we go, see all these little pieces? There's magnets in there. That's why all those little pieces are sticking to the magnets. I took the magnets and before I glued the one piece to the other piece, I make sure the magnets are going the way they want to go, as magnets do. And I add, actually most of the time when I'm doing this, I will use Collage Medium. It takes a little bit longer to dry, but it gives you a stellar hold. I don't use it all the time, not because I don't like it, but because it's just a little bit thicker and it takes a little longer to dry and I'm way too impatient. So I will. These are the basic gray mini magnets, I think, on Amazon. I've shared that before. So I'm going to put the glue down. And then this is where it can get tricky. This is my personal preference. I'll go back and separate them later after they dry. I will put some more of that Collage Medium right here. And I put, to make sure that they line up, because this is the inside, I want this magnet to go down straight just like this. I want it to sit, see, this is why I do it that way, to make sure that it's straight and it lines up. Now there's probably a million tricks and better ways to do it, but this is how I do it. And this has worked for me. And then I just put this aside and let it dry for a little bit. Once the Collage Medium has done its job and the magnets are dry, I'll take a flat, this is the Cricut tool, but any flat tool, and I'll probably tear them apart right now because they're not dry, but I'll show you. I put this Cricut between the two magnets, and yes, it does work, but see, they're not dry, so once they're dry, I put the Cricut tool or the knife between the two magnets and I lift it. It's going to peel off when I do this now, but you get the idea. Oh, well, there it worked. Okay, so once they're dry, now I will come cover the top magnet, or the flat magnet. I guess that's a better way to put it. I'm going to cover the flat magnet with glue. Oh, I'm almost at an hour. This is going to take forever to upload. I am so sorry. And here I was being quick. All right. And then I'll clamp these. I'll use my clamps to make sure it's good and tight. You can use any wet glue of your preference. I don't know which one I have in this particular bottle. I've been trying out a bunch of different ones. Some dries faster than others, but they all essentially work the same way. I don't have a huge preference one over another. All right, so I'm going to clamp this down and let this dry. That is super important. You want this to dry. All right, so I've got my pocket sewn in here. I've got my magnet on the outside, on my flap. I've got the magnet here. I hope I didn't wiggle that and remove it. My last step before I'm done is to glue the insert. No, see? Whew. Don't do as I say, not as I do. You want to put your insert in, your pages, all right? I use, so you've got those two, you've got the score line to fold your back cover, the score line for your front cover, and because of the file folder that I used, I've got 2 more lines in there. I'm going to use the back line, or the one closest to the back cover, as my guide, and I'm going to sew this in with my sewing machine. I use a wider stitch. My machine, it's called 4.5. I use a straight stitch and I make it as wide as it'll go. And I use my clamps, clamp this in place, sew, sew, sew. That's my last step before I put my insert in. So it's all sewn together, it's all assembled, it's happy. Now I tuck it inside here. I glue the spines first. My first step is I glue the 2 spines together, wet to wet, and I clamp it until it's dry in just a minute or 2. And then I fold over the front, and then I fold over the back and glue them down. And I do it in those steps simply because it gives you more wiggle room and it makes it way easier to line up. When that is all said and done, this should be fine or good enough for now. It doesn't take long to dry. The magnet will hold closed, and then I would put my Distress Collage Medium on the back of my little flower disc, and I put my little flower disc there. All right, let's see, there was one more thing. I have this tool out to show you something. Oh, that's just when I decorated the back. Now you get to do the fun parts. You get to put, you know, it's all glued in. You get to fill your ephemera holder with treats. What did I do? I don't know what I did. I did something. Oh, I know what I did. Here, I'll show you all these bits. All that out of the way. All right, I put another hole in the cover. Remember, this is kind of thicker because it's on file folder. And I folded up a bit of this ribbon so that I have a tape measure basically, and then put it on with a bulb pin. And that gives me a measuring tool so I can measure my specimens. And then I tucked all the little treats inside the pocket. And then on the back, I added a couple labels because, you know, I like labels. And then I had these little folding scissors that I just attached with a bulb pin. And then that, it's a gift. It's a fun little treat to throw in your bag if you're going hiking. And you can see here, the Distress Collage Medium, that's what I use to hold this in place. It dries clear. It's great glue. I would probably use it more often. It just takes a bit to dry. All right, thank you so very much for watching. Thank you, Cara, immeasurably for doing this with me and for the fabulous treasures you shared with me. You really made it easy to create because you gave me such fun things to work with. Take care and happy creating.